We're here live in Hollywood, California, where the sun is shining and it's 75 degrees again, and all is well for the time being. Welcome to whatever the hell this is, the Secret Life of Steve Martin today. Glad you're all here. Glad everyone came and watched This Week in Show Business History, which is starting to take off. I'm completely shocked. What's up, Yosemite? Welcome everyone who's here. Mike Schaefer, some of the old gappers are here. Rondell 56. These people like been followers, man, with two brains. This guy's favorite movie. You know what I'd really like to, because there's so many freaking movies. If you can put down in the comment section what your favorite Steve Martin movie is. Welcome, Florida. Murphy's in the house. Dave Murphy. Everyone loves Dave Murphy. In the comment section, because I'd like it to be more interactive. I obviously can't cover 50 movies, which is what Steve Martin did, and I'll get into as many as I can. But let us know what your favorites are down below or in the live chat. And also, while I'm thinking of it, let us know what characters you want to cover as episodes, in terms of, I'm going to do, after this, I'm going to do Dan Aykroyd. But put down who you feel you want to cover as an episode, in the comment section, not in the chat. In the chat, just put your favorite films there. And Father of the Bride, really. There's 3 Fathers of the Bride, which is kind of interesting. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Yeah, that's the Jerk. Simple Twist of Fate. That's an interesting choice. I was watching Leap of Faith. He's got Leap of Faith and Simple Twist of Faith. I think people get confused of them. Oh yeah, Bill Hicks is on the list. I'm just trying to get an order of. I don't usually write, but I really enjoy your shows. Well, you could write. Laura, come on. What's it? It's no big deal. Nobody could see you. 3 Amigos. Yeah, that's a good one. I was watching Martin Short with Steve Martin on this tour they did a couple of years ago last night. I am Mary Williamson, not to be confused with the New Age Mary Williamson, or maybe it is Mary Williamson who ran for president. Okay, so My Blue Heaven. Okay, we'll get into that a little bit. House Sitter. Okay, I don't think he was in Groundhog Day, but nice try. Stephen Wright. Yeah, he's on the list. Definitely. There's people. I have a long list. I'm just trying to get the order. I got a list of about 150 names right now, but I'm trying to get the order of what to do. Yeah, Martin and Short. I was just watching that last night, that Netflix special that I kind of recommend. But hold on, before we get started, I got to honor the sponsors of the show, because without them, the show would not be possible. And we've got these playoff games coming up I got the Packers Saturday night. It's on, just for people who don't know, Amazon Prime has bought the Packer Bears wild card game. So again, you have to search through the internet to find where your favorite team is. But for the playoffs, these 2 products, or these 2 flavors of biltong, are going to get me through these playoffs, because this is like gourmet filleted steak in a bag, already cooked and dried, and you can eat this pure protein during the playoffs. And there's going to be a lot of great games coming up. I tend to miss the entire season until like the last 3 regular season games, and then I get into the playoffs with football, because baseball goes in November now. It's a long story, but these 2 flavors are my favorite of the Biltong USA, and you can use the secret code, which is Mark G. Please don't tell anyone the secret code, or we'll have to kill you. But you could eat these right out of the bag. I like to put it on a plate and microwave it for about 15, 20 seconds, and it gets really juicy and soft and hot, which is why I like it. But you don't have to do that. Sometimes I eat it right out of the bag. But I say this for you fat bastards out there who don't want to sit there eating chips these entire playoff season with you and your wife and your fat friends. Switch to this. No carbs, all protein, total energy, out of the bag. Use the secret code. You get 10% off, which will cover your shipping. But now I just want to tell you something else, because the guy has gone into the cookie business. This is Anton's. You see the ones there. This is my favorite flavor right here, which is a white chocolate oat biscuit vanilla flavor. It's got like a hint of coconut in there. And they're like cookie biscuits. You know, it's like their version of Oreos. The chocolate, this is the vanilla version. This box is now empty. This, you know, hint to Biltong USA, send care package immediately. But you will love these. These are huge in South Africa, where Anton and his family came from. But my favorite one are these shortbread cookies, simply because of the title of them, which is "Eat Some More." You can't make this up. These are absolutely delicious. Knock yourself out. Try the cookies. You get the same 10% off. And this guy is homeschooling his family, moved to Prairie, Texas, emigrated from South Africa, loves America, and he's glad to be here. You'll help out a new American legal immigrant family, which came over from South Africa fairly recently. The whole family's in the business. The wife, the kids are enslaved, despite child labor laws, and it could really help the show. Okay, that being said, Cyrano de Bergerac, Roxanne. Okay, where do you guys want to start? Let's start off with, how about Martin being born? Stephen Glenn Martin, born in 1945, August 14th, in Waco, Texas, to Mary Lee Stewart, who was born in 1911. His mother died in 2002. And Glenn Vernon Martin, who was born in 1914, died in 1997. Here's a couple of pictures of these guys. This is them, obviously older. It's a weird story, because look how his father looks like him. His father was a wannabe actor. The mother, look at this. I mean, he looks like some sort of version of Steve Martin. The father was in a bunch of plays in Hollywood. Just to back up for a second, they moved from Waco, Texas to Hollywood because the mother and the father are enamored with show business. Now, the mother comes from a brutally conservative Baptist family in Texas, where they don't allow gambling, theater, card playing, dancing. The whole mishpucha doesn't allow it to happen because of the Baptist upbringing. But she's a rebel, and the father's a rebel. So what do they do when they rebel? They move to Hollywood, California. Hello. And this is pretty early on in life. He has a sister named Melinda, who's older than him. You see Melinda on the right. The mother and the father, once they get to Hollywood, California, he actually gets a job at the ranch market, which is still in business, I think, in Hollywood. And Hollywood Ranch Market was just on Vine. I don't know if it's still there, but this is him, and they're in a coffee shop. But he gets minor parts in these plays at the Callboard Theater on Melrose. Here he is on the right and the left, playing two different parts, I think, is Dan. So when he's 8 years old, the family, oh yeah, like and subscribe. That wouldn't kill you. While I take a sip of this coffee, now would be a good time to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, because you're going to forget later. You're going to be going off to see Baylor is in Waco. Yeah, that's interesting. He didn't go to Baylor, though. Bowfinger is one of my favorites. We'll get to Bowfinger. But like it right now, there's a break in the action with the score 17-14. And there's a injury on the field. So now would be a good time to like and subscribe to the show, which really helps us, by the way. 8 years old. They are living in Inglewood, California. They moved from, if you know the layout here, Inglewood is right below the airport. This will be Garden Grove. They will then move to Orange County. But before this, they moved from Hollywood to Inglewood. He goes to Oak Street Elementary School. But they're right in the flight path of LAX, and he believes that every time he hears a plane, He paranoidally believes the Russians are going to be dropping the A-bomb on his house. Go figure. It was that time of history. The mom is a great piano player. The dad is a very good singer. He gets these parts in Hollywood plays. Unfortunately for Steve Martin, his dad is extremely abusive. They move to Garden Grove. Here's the dad thinking about beating him with a strap again. They moved to Garden Grove, and he gives up his career. This is Orange County. They moved to Garden Grove, and he becomes a real estate developer, the father. And Orange County is literally being constructed out of thin air. They are 2 miles away from Anaheim and essentially in the backyard of a brand new corporation called Disneyland. And you could see Disneyland, which is relatively new at this time. They are literally in the shadow of Disneyland. He loves he loves Laurel and Hardy. His mother, like I said, is a Baptist daughter. And this is the Golden Horseshoe. Steve Martin, at the age of 10, will get a job in 1955 working at Disneyland after school at 10 years of age, selling guidebooks, wearing that straw hat and a vest, and being part of this Main Street magic shop. And he will work there. This is unbelievable. From the age of 10 to the age of 18. That's his first job, and it lasts a long time doing Disney stuff. And he begins to learn how to do magic tricks. This is him monkeying around with something over here. But he works at the the Main Street Magic Shop, which is a Disney legacy, front over there. And he begins to see a guy at the Golden Horseshoe in the Magic Kingdom named Wally Bogue. Now, Wally Bogue is a vaudeville comedian performer who does 5 shows a day. He was there for, this is Wally Bogue. Wally Bogue, I think he was there for over 30, 40 years. A vaudeville guy, Steve Martin's inspiration. Steve Martin, as a kid, studies his act from the audience. He eventually will get a chance to do a 5-minute opener for Wally Bogue. But Wally Bogue works with balloons. Wally Bogue does magic tricks. He essentially steals the entire act. Everything you saw from Steve Martin, less the banjo, was stolen from this guy, Wally Bogue, who did not know it was going on, because Steve Martin will take it to Knott's Berry Farm. He will be at the Birdcage Theater, and then he will go to San Francisco to the boarding house up there and work that place. He begins to copy, like I said, everything. I don't know if you have any additional photos of Wally, because this is Steve Martin. He'll begin to do shows for the Elks Club, for the Boy Scouts, for the Rotary Club. At the age of 15 years of age, he's doing these magic acts, magic tricks for kids. And he vows not to do any show for kids below the age of 8. His diary, I've read his diary. It's kind of fascinating because he makes notes about his career all through his life. And it's in a couple. Thank you for that. That's great. He makes notes about his career from the age of 15 on, and you can read the joke books that he steals his jokes from, the magic act books where he takes his magic act from. He writes about Wally Bogue, how he worships him, the balloon trickster vaudevillian at Disneyland at the Golden Horseshoe. He shows you where he gets all his stuff. It's kind of fascinating because he begins to develop an act because he can't master the magic tricks. He stumbles into a world where the failed magic tricks become funny. He realizes, he has an epiphany that for whatever it's bad to steal a whole show. Yeah. Well, he has an epiphany that he's never going to be the greatest magician in the world. And he realizes it's too difficult. He's working on it night and day, all these magic tricks that he buys in a box, and he does the rings and all these different things that you could buy as a kid. But he realizes that people start laughing and enjoying the fact that he fails at these magic tricks. And he has an epiphany that he can combine comedy with magic. And that becomes the beginning of the Steve Martin that you will later know. This riffing on these failed tricks that he tries instead of perfecting the actual tricks. He will go to Long Beach State College and he will study logic there. He will switch to philosophy. He will go to UCLA and begin to study philosophy there. He will, like I said, study logic and then switch to philosophy. There's a guy named Ludwig Wittgenstein, who I've never heard of, a German philosopher, becomes the guru to Steve Martin's plan to become a philosophy professor, which is what he wants to do. He wants to teach and work at UCLA. I mean, that's his dream at that point. He's got longish hair. Maybe we could show a couple of pictures of him from that time, because this is, I want to say, 67-ish, 68. Yeah, around this period of time. He gets diagnosed with a thing called prolapsed mitral valve, which we know as a heart murmur. It's rather benign, and it goes away as you get older. And he never had really any heart problems, but it makes him a hypochondriac for the rest of his life, by the way. Even though this, like hypochondriacal stuff, it's completely imaginary. But he becomes a germaphobe, and this hairdo, by the way, is so insane. Even by Steven standards. He will go to Vegas. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but he will go to Vegas and open for Anne Margaret, looking not much different than this. I mean, look at this. This is the Chris Christopherson period, where he will move to Laurel Canyon and hang out with members of the Eagles. And he's still got his banjo there. But this is like his Chris Christopherson Eagles period. And he's hanging out with a Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, who will later back him up on the King Tut record recording. But at this point in the story, he is looking to develop the act, and he signs a $500 a week deal. This is an interesting thing. He signs a deal with the Smothers Brothers to be a writer. The Smothers Brothers fire all the older writers, and they hire him. He's got a girlfriend who's a dancer on the Smothers Brothers Hour, and she turns his stuff over to Mason Williams, who is the head writer. He can't get approved by the producers, so Mason Williams pays him out of his pocket. He never really officially gets approved to be on the staff, but he's writing with an obscure guy named Bob Einstein, who we now know is Albert Brooks's brother, and also Funkhauser later on Curb, and also Super Dave Osborne. That becomes his writing partner. But his other writing partner is the recently deceased Rob Reiner, who will, you can see Rob Reiner on the right there. Rob Reiner, when we get up to The Jerk, will have a cameo, and I don't think anybody's ever caught this uncredited cameo in The Jerk, as the guy who picks him up for the first hitchhiking ride and takes him to the end of the fence. If people remember The Jerk, he begins to, do this writing work for the Smothers Brothers. The show gets canceled pretty quickly, but at $500 a week, just think about that. That's about $3,500 a week in today's money. This is 1967, 68. He then, when the show gets canceled, he signs on for $1,500 a week to write for Sonny and Cher, and to the Glenn Campbell Hour, and people who remember Pat Paulson rather. He begins to make good money, but he realizes he's trapped like a rat. He lives with a cat named Gary Mule Deer. Anyone who remembers Gary Mule Deer, he might have been around a long time and knows something about comedy. one thing he does is when he fails at the magic, he realizes he can recreate himself into a fool and make himself look stupid for laughs. Now, this takes a lot of suppression of ego for a comedian to do this. And he masters this through his studies in philosophy. And he's able to make himself the butt of these jokes. And people start laughing at him and then with him. So it's kind of an interesting thing that develops for him. But one of the turning points is he goes to San Francisco to this place called the boarding house, and one of my favorite routines that he did. It's a 200 or 300 seater, and he begins. This is after he goes on the road and he's opening for rock acts, and he realizes it's costing him more money to do this than he's actually making. And you could see this in his diary. He said he made $250, but it cost him $300 for the hotel and travel. So he says, I got to get out of this. And the one way he decides to get out of this is to become his own headliner. And that means starting small at the Troubadour, the boarding house, the Ice House in Pasadena, when there's literally 15, 20 people there. And he doesn't care because he figures the audience is going to find him at some point. I mean, he's on the road opening for the Carpenters. He's on the road opening for the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, whose manager becomes their manager, and then they will back him up later on King Tut and stuff. But he's playing banjos for the whole thing. You say, why does he play banjo? He is very, very determined to become famous, and he studies the great ones, and he studies some of his heroes. Jack Benny. He studies the great Henny Youngman, who I knew very well back in the day, and he realizes that these cats were using violins as props. The banjo becomes a prop for his act, just like Jack Benny did, just like Henny Youngman did. They very rarely played it in their act, but they would use it on occasion to think through the next joke or to have a break in the action. And that's what Steve Martin does with the banjo. He's never in a band. The whole thing is for a prop. He masters it by playing. This is a little side story. He masters playing the banjo by turning the 45 records down to 33 and a third of Lester Flatt's and Earl Scruggs, and picking at a slower speed, following them playing, Foggy Mountain Breakdown and shit. And he's able to copy that repetitively. He obviously has an obsessive personality. Yeah, I knew Henny. Yeah, sure. Who didn't know Henny? Henny was in my office at Lampoon telling me he wanted God to take his wife because she was on life support at that time. But that's a story for when we get to Henny Youngman. Anyway, he starts to use the banjo as a prop, and he's a prop comic. Did he eat with the Carpenters? Yeah. Well, we're going to get into who his girlfriends were, because one of his girlfriends was a carpenter who later had an eating disorder. But she was one of his original girlfriends, along with Mary Tyler Moore. I mean, he dated all these incredible, really women who seemed to have absolutely no connection to each other. His group of dating and relationships is really, really abstract. But he begins to branch out and do these gigs, and he's doing college gigs, and he realizes the college gigs are going through the roof, but he's not making any money at these college gigs because they don't really pay him that much. Yeah, he was Carrot Top. He was the original Carrot Top. That's a good point. Hold on. He also said later on, when he saw Saturday Night Live, he had no idea there were other people like him out there doing avant-garde comedy, which is essentially what he wanted to do. He wrote in his diary and a letter to his girlfriend that he wanted to do avant-garde comedy. And he didn't know about the existence of Andy Kaufman. He didn't know about the existence of Chevy Chase. He didn't know about the existence of any of these people until he saw them on TV, because he was on the West Coast. They were on the East Coast. He didn't know they existed. And he thought he was the only one in the country doing this type of phony showbiz patter, smug, false, braggadocio. He thought he invented that, but apparently he was wrong. And he said, interestingly enough, he said that if he didn't make it big as a comic, I mean, become the biggest comic in the world, which he will become as a stand-up, he would have been a West Coast Andy Kaufman. He wanted to be, not be Andy Kaufman himself, but be that type of conceptual artist who did conceptual art. And that's what he's doing at the beginning. The thing I was going to mention about it, the boarding house in San Francisco, he did this wonderful bit where he doesn't go out on stage. Well, William, it's too late for you to meet Henny Youngman now, but maybe in the afterlife. Before he goes on stage, he has a live mic backstage and he makes believe he's denouncing the crowd, talking to someone backstage saying, look at these stupid idiots out here. I can't believe they came to see me. I don't even have an act. What a bunch of losers. And this becomes part of his avant-garde comedy. And he comes out afterwards and goes, hey, how's everybody doing? Completely changing his personality. And then after the show goes backstage and goes, the same thing. What a bunch of losers. I can't believe they came out and paid to see me. And people dig this because it's not a straight stand-up act. He does come up with all these different things. And maybe there's a couple of photos of him here that we could take a look at that time period, because yeah, look at, this is avant-garde Steve. He will go, I think this was in Knoxville, Tennessee. He had a gig there and there was no way out other than to go through the crowd. There were no sides to the stage. And he walked out through the crowd. Yeah, look at that one. He walked out to the crowd and took the crowd with him outside. And the crowd of about 200 college students went walking with him through the neighborhood, following him because they wouldn't let him leave. And they just kept following him until he found an empty swimming pool in a backyard of a suburban house. And he told everyone to get into the swimming pool. All 200 kids got into this empty swimming pool in back of somebody's empty suburban house outside of Knoxville, near the university, I guess. And he body surfed on top of 200 college kids, swimming on top of them as they supported him in kind of a punk rock style thing way before punk rock. They became his support system in that swimming pool. And he swam laps, quote unquote, with these kids holding him up in the swimming pool. I thought that was visually insane. And then he begins to realize, this happens at the Troubadour. He goes outside, he'll take these people to McDonald's, order 300 hamburgers, and then change the order to one single French fry. He does not know that Andy Kaufman is doing the same thing on the East Coast. It's kind of bizarre. It kind of reminds me of the creation of swing music. You know, when Ellington and Basie were creating swing, they weren't aware that there was a guy named Bob Wills in Texas creating Western swing. Sometimes these things are just in the zeitgeist and in the air. And Duke Ellington doing it up in Harlem, and Basie doing it in Chicago and everything, and then and Wills doing it in Texas. He, like I said, he goes on the road, he fills in. Eventually, he will do about 500. I want to say 500 TV shows. And I'm not even exaggerating. I'm talking about the Della Reese show. I'm talking about the talk shows during the daytime. He becomes the guy that they go to do these fill-in things. He's in Southern California. He's in LA, so he's available. And in 1968, he goes to see the movie The Producers with some friends. And I think it was at Westwood because he was going to UCLA. And he smokes weed with them for the first time, and he has a massive panic attack. And he can't leave the house for days on end. And he finally, that spirals into some obsessive fear of night, and he can't go out at night. This panic attack makes him swear off any use of drugs for the rest of his life. And it was straight up massive anxiety attack, which lasted weeks, by the way. Usually it goes away, but this is 1968. And he's, swears it off and never, ever goes back to drugs in his life. Doesn't take acid, doesn't take, any narcotics. He doesn't take, obviously, heroin. He doesn't do cocaine. He does drink wine. He's that kind of guy. But in 1974, I don't know if we have a poster for this. 1974, he goes on a tour. This is like a weird gig he gets, and he makes a film tour of Canada. He goes to Toronto. I don't know. We might have a poster for this. It's called Eastern Canada Travelogue. It's like a film. The funny side. The funnies side of this Eastern Canada travelogue. Here's a poster. Take a look at this. This is one of the earliest Steve Martin things. He gets paid by the nation of Canada to promote Toronto and Montreal. So he does this walk and talk and performance of comedy through Canada, interviewing people. Here he is in his hotel room talking about these buildings, and maybe we could, look at this. Is him, by the way. This is at the Ice House in Pasadena, which is part of the film, but it's not up in Canada. It's actually in Pasadena, and you could see how small these audiences are. And he's already got the arrow through the head, so keep that in mind, because he's already doing the balloon tricks. And this is pretty early on that this is him in Canada with the banjo up in Toronto. This is one of his first gigs. He will also do a short film. He also does Maxwell's Silver Hammer in the film version. This is the poster for this. Yeah, the world's first travelogue comedian. It's actually pretty funny. He does a film called The Absent-Minded Waiter. This is after he performs a singing version of Maxwell's Silver Hammer in a film version of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That's a little bit later on, but he does a film called The Absent-Minded Waiter. The Absent-Minded Waiter is only 8 minutes long, and it's got Buck Henry in it, and it's written and directed by Carl Gottlieb, who later write Jaws. And it was shot in 2 days. As I said, it cost $96,000, and he uses it to open his performances at colleges and on the road. And everyone gets to see this 8-minute, really funny bit of a waiter who keeps forgetting the order and brings them the wrong food and everything. And it's really interesting. But here's the hook. It gets nominated for an Oscar for Best Short Film, which is really bizarre. But that'll lead us into around 1976. He hosts SNL for the first time. And I think that thing puts him into the stratosphere. The first hosting of SNL, by the way, the first time he hosts SNL, there's a fire at Studio 8H, and they had to shoot that. I don't know who really remembers this. They had to shoot it in Brooklyn at another studio. But maybe we could show a couple of photos from that. I think he did the Elephant Guy, the parody of the Elephant Man, which was very funny, where he wants to be the freak. He does a parody of Beat It, the Michael Jackson thing. Again, this was shot in Brooklyn, not at Rockefeller Center. That's a little hard to see, but nevertheless, the hosting really puts him on the map. He will go on to host, I believe, 16 times. 1977, he puts out an album called Let's Get Small. And Let's Get Small is owned entirely by him. The manager that he has, Marty Klein, the agent that he has, Marty Klein, negotiates a deal for him. I think Marty Klein might have been at UTA. But Beat It was around 83, so maybe it wasn't Beat It, but the situation is that he owns the album that he puts out called Let's Get Small. And on that album is Excuse Me, among other things. And after he appears and becomes bigger on SNL, the album goes through the roof, and it just sells. It goes like platinum instantaneously. And yeah, there's some photos of him promoting the album, which I think is somewhere. Oh yeah, it's right in back of me over here. Yeah, here's my copy of it. And you could see the balloon stuff here. Yeah, it's William McCune, Ramblin' Man, theme from Ramblin' Man, then Vegas, Let's Get Small. Let's Get Small is his parody of Let's Get High. In other words, he riffs on it like he's saying Let's Get High, and they change it to Let's Get Small. There it is from the Tonight Show. When he was guest hosting the Tonight Show, he promoted the album quite a bit, and he started to fill in for Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson loved Steve Martin. He had an act called Flydini, and he does it, I think, the last night. He does it at the beginning of his career, but he also does it the last night of Carson's run. And Flydini is an incredible act where he's got all of these props wrapped around his legs inside of his pants, and one by one he pulls them out of the fly of his trousers, hence the name Flydini. This is more of his record stuff, but he does the Tut record itself sells 1.5 million copies, and the size of his audience doubles. The Blues Brothers opened for him at Universal Amphitheater. Here's the Tut. This is absolutely crazy. He goes to Lorne Michaels and he says, I have this song. It's all he's got. Doesn't have any of this stuff. He's just got the song King Tut. Lorne Michaels and the production team build this entire idea and set for that show of him recording King Tut, including Blue Lou Marini, who comes out of the background casket and takes a live solo as a golden idol in the middle of this. This is all the SNL band in back of him and these dancers. But this was done by SNL. Steve Martin said he just came with the song, and Lorne did this. Lorne becomes his best friend. He will be his best man at his wedding. He becomes super tight with Lorne Michaels. This being Steve Martin, will do 2 nights at Nassau Coliseum near where I lived, and pulls in $840,000 in gross cash receipts for 2 nights. I mean, think about that. Let's Get Small sells 1.5 million albums. I think the second one, Wild and Crazy Guy, does 2.5 million. And Comedy's Not Pretty that was the third one. And Steve Martin begins to realize that, he says, I realize that I'm a fad and that this thing is going to peak. And he realizes there's nowhere to go. He's trapped like a rat. He explores different things on Saturday Night Live in these sketches, but here he is with Lorne. They become very close friends, and he goes to St. Bart's with Lorne and every year, and he becomes friends with Martin Short after he meets him on Three Amigos, which is years later. But he will be very close to Lorne Michaels. And I think it's second to Alec Baldwin, the amount of hosting he actually did. I think Alec Baldwin may have done it 17 times or so. But I just wanted to show a bunch of photos of his love life because there's a lot of interesting women on this list of girls. Let's take a look at some of his girlfriends. Now, this one's kind of interesting because he was opening for her at the Troubadour. This is, of course, Linda Ronstadt, who may or may not have been with the governor of California at that time. But she was with Steve Martin. He will also date Karen Carpenter, as I said. This is Bernadette Peters, who will star with Steve Martin. and she will become very close to him. There is a girl named Eve Babbitt. So this here is Victoria Tennant. She was British. She will be in LA Stories. She will be with him. They get married, actually, and she will be his wife for 1986 to 1994. She will, out of the blue, divorce him and then quickly marry Kirk Stambler, who was a pretty big entertainment lawyer in Hollywood. There's Karen Carpenter, Healthier Days, obviously. Did we see Mary Tyler Moore, by the way? Because that is yeah, that's the cute young Mary. I don't know if you could find a picture of Eve Babbitt. Eve Babbitt was like a Edie Sedgwick of the West Coast. There's Anne Heche. He dated her, I guess, when she was pre-lesbian days, pre-Ellen DeGeneres days, and then she switches back. She was a lesbian and then switches back to a straight woman, and then had a thing with my friend Thomas Jane for a number of years. But anyway, so these are really a diverse group of women. He will eventually marry one of them named Anne Stringfield. Anne, I don't know if you have a picture of Anne. She will, here's Anne. She will be, I'll get into her a little later, but she is going to be his wife. And she will marry him, I think, in 2007. And she was a fact checker at the New Yorker. He starts to write these short stories for the New Yorker, and she calls him up to fact check some of the stories. And the next thing you know, they're a couple, and she, I believe in 2013, will birth him a daughter at the age of 67. But that's a little bit down the line. I wanted to get to this point. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting picture because they don't like to show the kid. That's I would say that's 2015-ish, around in there, so not too long ago. Anne had a little boy. That's true, but not with people I know. Anyway, so Victoria Tennant will divorce him in 1994 just to get out of this thing. Martin spirals into a black hole, reads every self-help book ever written, and he gets Roger, the Labrador Retriever, somehow in the settlement. But he begins to play poker with a group called the Hollywood Gourmet Poker Club. And that includes Barry Diller. That includes Johnny Carson. That includes Neil. It includes Chevy Chase, Barry Diller, and a bunch of other guys who are really like inside Hollywood, and also Neil, Neil Simon, the playwright. And they do this for many, many years, privately and quietly, pulling off this poker game, and he becomes very close to Chevy, becomes very close to Johnny Carson. I guess they switch homes or whatever. But he also begins to collect art. Now, this is really interesting because his art collection, he refuses to talk about two things. Refuses to talk about having children his entire life, even though he has 28 children total in Hollywood cinema, in fictitious Hollywood cinema films. He's got 28 children. In real life, he refuses to have any. And this Anne Stringfield apparently talks him into it as a part of the deal to marry him at the end here. And he agrees to have a child with her. But his sister said that his family was so damaging to him. At the age of 10, he buys a pair of shorts, like biker shorts, to wear, a skateboard or bicycle shorts, for $4. Father beats the living shit out of him and says, you can't afford those extravagancies. Now, keep in mind, his father is a fairly wealthy developer in Orange County, and he's beating this kid. And he paid for these shorts out of his own newspaper route and Disney money. And he vows never, at the age of 10, never to take a cent from his family ever again. And he never does. At the age of 10, he never takes another penny. When his father goes to see The Jerk with him and a couple of his friends, they go out to dinner afterwards, never says a word about The Jerk. Carl Reiner's there. The Jerk is obviously a massive hit. They go to see it at Westwood, UCLA, massive crowds. By the way, they had a phony screening of The Jerk with a red carpet. This is the week before, and everyone shows up for a screening of The Jerk with a red carpet and lights and everything else. And it turns out just to be the trailer. And that was the joke. And everybody leaves laughing that they saw the trailer, but they come back a week later for the film. They go out to dinner, him and his father and two other people and two of his friends. And one of them finally says to his dad, well, what did you think of the film, Mr. Martin? And he said, I could tell you this, he's no Charlie Chaplin. And that was the only thing he said for the evening. His father was one of his biggest detractors. His father, no matter what he did, would criticize him. And his father was embittered because of his own failed career and ending up being, a real estate developer instead of a star in Hollywood that he wanted to be. And he takes it out on this kid. First, he takes it out by beating the living shit out of him within an inch of his life when he's 10, 11, and 12, 13 years of age. And he's not a kid who's acting out, by the way. This is not a kid like Chevy Chase, who also got the shit beaten out of him, but was, someone who was highly rebellious. That's not the case here. This is a guy who's just a savage animal who's beating him with a strap, who is gigantic compared to him, by the way. If you show some photos of the dad, take a look at the difference in how big the dad is in some of these shots from before. This guy towers over him. He looks like a brute. I don't know if we have him handy, but there's some of them where he's standing up that he just looks like so imposing. It doesn't matter. I mean, you could see them. Yeah, look at him there. I mean, Steve looks totally intimidated by the guy. Just the body language of the entire thing. He just looks like he's scared to death of him. Look at him there. Just looks like he could be a lot of trouble. Yeah, look at that. I mean, that's a telling photo too. The father seems to want to be the focus of the photo right there, as opposed to the rest of them in that photo. Wow. So Steve will do stand-up for 18 years. He will do this act, and he gets trapped in the act, and he realizes that he's no longer a stand-up comic. He's the host of a party. And the party is that they show up with balloons, they show up with these noses, they show up with arrows in their head, they're drinking, they're smoking, they're stoned, they're laughing, and it's a party. And they're yelling out the routines for him to do. He can't get any new material in there. The fans won't allow it. The promoters won't allow it. And he's trapped like a rat. Now, he's in these golden handcuffs where he's making millions of dollars, but he realizes he's got to get out of it. And the way he was in Vegas, I got to tell you this one, this Anne Margaret story when he was opening for Anne Margaret. His dad looks like an asshole. He was opening for Anne Margaret. This is a couple of years before. And who does he worship? He worships Elvis Presley, who's headlining in Vegas that week at the Hilton. Leaves his door open because he knows that Elvis. Yeah, look at this. This is the Elvis in Vegas. Mort Saul, by the way. I would like to have seen that Mort Saul show on the right there. Dick Clark, good old rock and roll thing with Jackie Wilson. I would have liked to have seen that show. Thanks, Judy. The situation where Elvis, he knows he's going to come see Anne Margaret because they're dating. So he leaves open the door to his dressing room, and Elvis comes in and he says, boy, you got some sense of humor. You're kind of oblique. And he says, thank you. And he doesn't know what to say to Elvis because he's so introverted. And Elvis is introverted. And Johnny Red, or one of the Elvis Mafia guys, says, we got to get going, Elvis. And he goes, no, I want to talk to the boy. And Elvis doesn't know what to say to him. So it's a standoff of the small talkers. And Elvis says, you want to see my guns, boy? And Steve Martin says, sure. Okay, sir. And he takes out one gun at a time. One is a Derringer that's in his ankle holster. Another one is a 38 police special. And another one is something else. I'm not really sure. And each gun, as he hands it to Steve Martin, He removes all the bullets, Elvis, and then hands it to him while he's holding the bullets. And Steve Martin says, "Here I am with Elvis Presley holding 3 empty guns, and Elvis has 18 bullets in his hands." And then he gives him back the guns. Elvis reloads the guns and leaves. And I thought, what a great encounter with Elvis Presley. I mean, just a fantastic moment in Vegas. But a couple of years later, he will look in the back of a sold out show, Steve Martin, and he will see in the back row at a hotel venue empty seats. And, you know, a lot of guys who are comics, you know, will focus on someone who's not laughing. I mean, it's just a thing you do. He sees one empty booth in the back, and he says this to his manager, who was the manager for the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band as well. He said, "I think we've peaked." And that is the end of his stand-up career. This will be in 1980 in August, and he will never, ever do stand-up comedy again. And that's the end of it. And he wants it to end. He can't go back on stage and do stand-up comedy because he's trapped in this persona, and he wants to get out and switch to the movie train. We'll get into his art collection in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to digress and show you how he switches from stand-up comedy. He does not want to be a stand-up comic. In an interview with Seinfeld, I saw that Jerry said to him, "Do you still write?" And he says, "Comedy?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "No." He says, "I write every day." And he says, "I ran into Chris Rock the other day, and Chris Rock writes comedy every day." And he says, I don't do that." And Seinfeld looks at him really bizarrely, like he doesn't know what he's dealing with here, because on paper, he is the most successful stand-up comic in American history. And this is a guy who quits in 1980 and doesn't go back. He will host the Oscars a couple of times. He will do it with Alec Baldwin. But essentially, being a stand-up comic for him is over. And very few people have walked away from that. Now, Chevy Chase was never a stand-up comic, but guys like Billy Crystal and others have always gone back. He does not want to go back. He did not like doing it, by his own admission. He wanted to get out of this thing. And how does he get out of it? He gets out of it by making a $4 million picture called The Jerk, which he works with Rob Reiner's father, Carl Reiner, from Your Show of Shows. And they bring in this guy Gottlieb from Jaws, and they work on this script and turn it into they extract this line from his act where he says, "I was a poor white child raised by a black family." That was out of his act. It was on one of his albums. And they extract that and they build the storyline of The Jerk around that. And that becomes the essence to the movie, The Jerk, and becomes a huge monster hit. I mean, it just goes off the rails. Like I said, Carl Reiner called him a rock star comedian. And he wanted to get Mike Nichols to direct it initially. He worshiped Mike Nichols, and he flies to New York. And Nathan Johnson was the name of the character. Yeah. He flies to New York and he meets Mike Nichols, and he's so introverted, Steve Martin, that he loses the power of speech. And he can't speak. It's hard to explain this, but he can't speak to Mike Nichols. So he can't really explain, I was born a poor black child. Yeah. And Jackie Mason is in there, and, they picked all the right people. I don't know if you've got this. A couple of photos I wanted to show you of the pickup truck. Here is the cameo I was talking about. That's Rob Reiner, by the way, in the pickup truck, who takes him to he got tongue-tied, yeah. Rob Reiner takes him to the end of the fence. If people remember, there's Rob on the right, the late Rob Reiner. And they were close because Rob Reiner had written for the Smothers Brothers as well, and will go on to become, a big star by himself. But Carl Reiner, the dad, who I don't believe is a great director. He's kind of a hack. Somehow hooks up with Steve Martin, and they make like 3 or 4 films together, and it was one bomb after another. Yeah, The Jerk is legitimately funny. You can't take that away from the script or from Reiner or from Steve Martin. And it was such a strong hit that everybody wanted him to do that again and again and again. And he doesn't do it again and again and again. He will come back with films like, this is really crazy. In 1981, he comes back with a film called Pennies from Heaven. Now, Pennies from Heaven had been a remake. It had also been a PBS special. And he does this musical, this gigantic MGM style musical, singing and dancing and learning how to do tap dancing. It's a huge production. These MGM dance numbers, if you look at them, look like they're from the 1940s. He does this is a kids orchestra they put together with Bernadette Peters dancing through it as the school teacher. It's set in the Depression, and they lip sync even songs by women and men, changing the gender, and he's lip sync songs by women. And it is something that he believes is a masterpiece. Unfortunately for him, nobody else does, and loses a ton of money. I mean, these are huge production numbers in Pennies from Heaven. He kind of spirals out of control after Pennies from Heaven, and he disappears and goes to London, where he goes into he walks around the street and is shocked that nobody recognizes him, because he can't walk around the streets of LA or New York or anywhere without being recognized. He kind of becomes a prisoner of his own fame after The Jerk. He's really, he can't really go to the store. He can't do anything. He's at that level of celebrity. And, he gets criticized as the stand-up guy, and also The Jerk as being the face of the me generation, this brainless group of people who are into disco and this post-war, this post-World War, post-World War II, post-Vietnam War, more importantly, generation that just wants to laugh and do drugs. Not that he's doing drugs, but the people who are his fans, who get stoned and crazy to see The Jerk over and over again. People seeing it like 50 times. It really becomes a crazy thing. He then he comes back and does Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. Now, this is a gimmicky thing where they intercut film noir, black and white, with him. And they go through all the film noir classics and build a story together of him intercutting with these stars from these gangster pictures. And this, again, is another box office bomb. And critically knocked, and he's now got 2 in a row where it's a complete failure. And he is trying to do avant-garde movies and conceptual art in film instead of giving people what they want, which is another version of the Jerk. He will do The Man with Two Brains after this. This is, again, Carl Reiner. It's a takeoff on some science fiction thing that was popular. I think it was called The Thing with Two Brains or something. But he plays this kind of smarmy surgeon, brain surgeon, and Kathleen Turner is in it, and she is brilliant in this thing, Kathleen Turner. Here she is, highly recommended, highly sexualized Kathleen Turner, coming off of one of those film noir crime things she had done. And she was quite willing to put it all out there in this movie, which I find to be very funny. I mean, the critics didn't like it, and it also didn't make any money. But I kind of liked it. This is, well, if you go back, I just want to go back to The Jerk for a second and show the house from The Jerk. I got a little story. They found a mansion in Beverly Hills when The Jerk makes money for putting that thing on his nose. This is the actual house. It was owned by a Saudi Arabian prince, and the house actually was this garage. They didn't do anything to it. It's still there, by the way. This is how it looked. This is so crazy. The production team did not redesign this home in Beverly Hills. This was a home that everyone in Beverly Hills hated because it was so insanely garish. This is what it looked like, and they shot the jerk. I think they rented it for like 15,000 a day or something. Take a look at this masterpiece here. Well, you can like and subscribe too. But anyway, I just wanted to show you a couple of shots from that. But getting back to if you go back to The Man with Two Brains, with Kathleen Turner, this film I thought worked, but apparently nobody else did. This is him bringing home his bride across the transom. She is a gold digger. She kills her first husband, and then she latches on to Steve Martin, and she doesn't want to have sex with him. She's making believe that she's crippled. There's some interesting beats to this movie, but apparently another bomb. And his arch nemesis becomes like Roger Ebert. He then does The Lonely Guy. Is that the next one? The Lonely Guy is so bad. Larry Hubbard, 1984. The Lonely Guy is another massive box office bomb. So he's now got 1, 2, 3. This is number 4 in a row. This is insane. And all they want him to do is The Jerk, or something like The Jerk. He's now got 4 of them in a row, but he's not done. He's not done. He hooks up with Lily Tomlin, and he does a movie called All of Me. And you go, well, how bad can the plot be for All of Me? Okay, how about Lily Tomlin has a new age guru who says when she dies, she's going to put her soul into the body of her daughter, and it mistakenly goes into the body of Steve Martin, an attorney, and it's only half of her soul goes into Steve Martin's body. So half of Lily Tomlin's soul controls half of Steve Martin's body mechanically, if you can follow this. He sees her. She doesn't disappear from the movie. She's not that stupid. When he looks in a mirror, for reasons that make no sense, there's Lily Tomlin talking to him in various mirrors throughout the film. All of Me, she's a wealthy heiress. At the beginning of the movie, she's told she's going to die, so lights up a cigarette, laughing about it, I guess, because she knows that her soul will go into her daughter. Steve Martin shows up about her will from the law firm, and hijinks ensues, and no money is made. And he's now got 5 consecutive flops in a row. I don't know how many flops. It may be a record. I really don't understand why they kept giving him pictures to do. I really don't get it. After 5, the rule of thumb in Hollywood is 3 for a star, but 5 is absolutely insane. The 5 comes to an end finally. Finally comes to an end in 1986 because he's got this poker game thing going on, and they come up with the 3 Amigos with Martin Short, Chevy Chase, and him. Now, this was originally supposed to be Belushi and Aykroyd, but that's not happening. So it becomes Chevy Chase and Steve Martin and Martin Short, and that becomes a hit. There are them a couple of years later and a couple of years before with their outfits on. It's a great movie. It's a hit movie. It's a funny movie. It's Martin Short's first movie. He doesn't know anybody. He talked about showing up there scared shitless. So yeah, he broke a record for 5 flops in a row. I don't know. I don't think that record's ever going to be broken. Yeah, I never watched any Steve Martin movies. Okay, well, he made 50 of them, so you must have missed something in the pop culture. This one's absolutely hysterical. We covered it in the Chevy Chase episode, so I don't want to dwell on it that long, because I did want to move to the same year he does a turn in Little Shop of Horrors with Rick Moranis and Bill Murray. which is a musical takeoff on the Roger Corman movie called Little Shop of Horrors. And man, is this funny. He pulls up on a motorcycle. He's wearing a black leather jacket. He's a sadistic dentist. And he meets a masochistic patient named Bill Murray. This is worth the price of admission to see this movie. Yeah, this is it right here. Wow. This is some kind of movie magic going on here. And the scene with Murray, he's singing all through this thing here. Yeah, look at this. This is great. This is absolutely great. This is such a little miniature gem. Also, Rick Moranis has really got a bigger part in the movie than Steve Martin does, but well worth it. Well worth it to see the Bill Murray thing. There's Moranis. You see the back of him there. Little Shop of Horrors, a little gem, especially for those particular scenes with Murray. Murray will do his Hollywood Minute movie reviews, and he will be savage on the failures of Steve Martin's movies, which I always found to be really funny. But this is great stuff. Great stuff. He will at the age of 35, he's got, 2 homes in Aspen, he's got a home in Aspen, a home in Pacific Palisades. And he was supposed to have Bill Murray in one of his movies, and Murray asked to be cut out. He said, "You don't need me in this movie anymore," which I think might've been LA Stories, but he asked to be cut out of the movie. He then will go and do, which we covered before in the John Candy episode, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Hughes. And the thing that's kind of interesting about it from Steve Martin's point of view is the soliloquy by John Candy at the end of the film, where he reveals to Steve Martin that his wife has been dead for 8 years. And Martin was off camera weeping as John Candy did that soliloquy. He said in an interview that he started crying, and it was a much longer soliloquy than what you see in the movie. Steve Martin has the original script, and it was over a page long, the John Candy thing. They cut it down for time, but Steve Martin just started crying. The situation became so emotional for him of that moment by John Candy, that was really his takeaway from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Plus, he's kind of playing a nasty jerk. If you recall that character, it's really the sweet guy is John Candy in that movie and not Steve Martin. It's kind of a reversal of roles, but again, becomes a gigantic hit because he's not carrying the picture himself. And I think that's the key. When he works with other people, it can be a huge hit. And obviously he's going to have financial success with some of these other movies. But I think the real secret is Steve Martin working with others, if I could say that. I mean, he will do a film after that called Roxanne. Now, Roxanne with Daryl Hannah. I don't know if people remember Roxanne in 1987. It's an interesting film, but it's a remake of Cyrano de Bergerac. And it was also a remake of the Jose Ferrer 1950 movie. He plays a guy in this movie. He writes the entire script, by the way, but he's writing it as a remake. He does have Jerry Lewis syndrome. He worships Jerry Lewis, by the way. So Roger is not wrong about that. He wants to do this remake, and he writes the script himself. And it's about a guy with a deformed nose that sticks out, this Cyrano de Bergerac situation. But he plays an American firefighter, volunteer firefighting chief of the fire department of this town in Oregon, or British Columbia, where I think it was filmed. And it's his first film ever. And he has almost magical superpowers. He's able to jump over buildings. He's like the greatest guy in the world. Physical, smart, funny, encyclopedic knowledge of everything. His fire department are a bunch of doofuses. And he has incredible physicality. A lot of it is done by stuntmen. And he has this one hampering thing, this debilitating nose, which robs him of all the confidence with women because of this insane nose. And the way it's designed, when he looks forward into the camera, his nose looks completely normal. And that's by design. And when he turns sideways, you see it for all the insanity that it is. That's why that picture of his parakeet on his nose, which I don't know how they got him to stay there. There's a bunch of that parakeet or whatever that bird is on there for a long time in different positions. It was a movie bird, obviously, but they trained that bird to stay on there. Yeah, Little Shop was on Broadway. That's right. So Roxanne becomes a moneymaker. He writes 75 different nose jokes. He has a face-off with a guy in a bar scene. It's directed by Fred Schapisi, who is a real director. Steve Martin has a tendency to find directors who are one and out kind of directors. And once he gets a real director, they will use him, and he will use Steve Martin better than some of these hack directors. But Roxanne and this movie will lead into, I believe at that point, 1988, into Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Michael Caine, which is a really smooth, again, he's working with a class act, Michael Caine, who can carry a picture by himself. And Michael Caine is transforming him into a con man. And you see this makeover at the beginning of the film of Michael Caine doing this professional makeover on him to physically teach him and socially teach him how to be a con man. And that includes literally learning how to walk and talk and think as a con man, which I found this film. This is like a real Hollywood movie. And I mean, it looks like a big budget film. It's shot in Europe. It's really well done. And I still recommend it. I still like watching it because it's really a cool film, for people who've never seen it. Some of these I went back and rewatched. I haven't seen in many, many years. But this one holds up. And Michael Caine is just fantastic in this. And after that, he does Parenthood, I think, in 1989. This becomes the beginning. I watch that once a year. Yeah. Incredible chemistry with Michael Caine. Parenthood becomes the first of his family comedies, of which he'll make money doing, not unlike Father of the Bride and Eight is Enough and some of these other ones, The House Sitter and A Simple Twist of Fate and everything. But this is really the first one. Rick Moranis, of course, comes back into Parenthood and starts to work with him again. Rick Moranis really becomes the best supporting actor of the whole group. Just trying to find a little bit of information on this. Yeah, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Parenthood, I just want to see the box office on this thing. It was a $20 million budget on Parenthood and made $126 million at the box office, which is a nice chunk of change for a movie of this type. Now, there's a couple others I just wanted to take a look at what Dirty Rotten Scoundrels did. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels did $42 million at the box office. Not great, but a better movie than the box. We're going to get into this. Parenthood is going to set a template. You're killing it tonight. Great. Edward, thanks for coming by. I love Steve Martin. Don't get me wrong. I'm killing it for a reason, because Steve Martin is a big part of American comedy, and I can't explain that enough. He is a total enigma because in a drug culture, he does not do drugs, and he is in the mainstream of American comedy on so many levels, making 50 films in a period of 40 some odd years, Edward. So, I mean, I can't do enough about him to get how important he is. I just want to get into this other thing now because we're going to get into My Blue Heaven. We're going to go into 1990. And My Blue Heaven is, again, we have Rick Moranis comes back as an FBI agent. And again, you see this trend of him having to work with someone to bounce comedy off of. Having a female love romantic interest doesn't work. It works for the romantic interest, but it's very difficult to work for both. Keep that in mind. It's really, really tricky to have the romantic interest work for as the comedy interest as well. So he plays a guy who, in case people don't know, set in Arizona. He's a gangster who is sent. Joan Cusack is in this, by the way. Does a great job. John Cusack's sister. He's sent to Arizona in the witness protection program. Now, you say, what's so interesting about this? You go, well, it's kind of interesting. Arugula, it's a vegetable. He goes shopping. It's a fish out of water story. Moranis also spurned drugs and also Canadian, not unlike Martin Short and not unlike John Candy. So there's a pattern there as well. But I want to point out one particular thing about the character that he's playing. The character he's playing is Henry Hill. And this is Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta in Goodfellas. This is the same Henry Hill. This story is based on Henry Hill, despite what people think. Henry Hill was sent to Arizona, where he kept getting arrested for selling 1,000 hits of ecstasy, and then they'd have to move him around the FBI. There's an entire story of Henry Hill that people don't know, and this comedy is kind of a takeoff on the Henry Hill story. Although it doesn't admit it, it's directed by Herbert Ross, who was a regular mainstream director. But the Henry Hill story becomes interesting because Henry Hill will become a drug addict himself. Henry Hill will go to the Kabod rehab here in LA, where I used to work as a drug counselor and therapist. And Henry Hill will later, with Kabod being a Jewish Orthodox place, but they did have a drug rehab program. And Henry Hill will marry a Jewish woman from Goodfellas and convert to Judaism, go to this drug rehab, get clean and sober, and write a cookbook on Italian recipes that the women in West LA loved. And he ended up living here in West LA. This is a side story, but that's what the show is about. And the Henry Hill, Ray Liotta from Goodfellas, and My Blue Heaven, there he is. There's Ray Liotta playing Henry Hill. The real Henry Hill will come from Arizona, from My Blue Heaven, and check into Kabod as a rehab and get clean and sober and become Jewish and write a cookbook. So kind of an interesting, weird side story on the character that he's playing in My Blue Heaven. Now, this will lead to the 1991 classic Father of the Bride, which many of you love, with Diane Keaton and Martin Short. Martin Short playing this over-the-top, obviously gay interior director who redesigns his house for the wedding. This has nothing to do with Sammy the Bull Gravano, by the way. Henry Hill was always stoned, yeah, and in real life too. So Father of the Bride is a beginning of the older Steve Martin films. It's directed by Charles Shire. It's one of these Nancy Meyer, Charles Shire productions. There's Diane Keaton, and Steve Martin will play. This is a scene where he finds a guy's bank book, who's the father of the guy she's marrying. This movie will make, it was a $20 million budget, by the way. It'll make $130 million at the box office. So that's why there'll be a second one. There's two Doberman pincers in this house that he keeps encountering when he visits the son-in-law's parents for dinner. Some hijinks ensue there. But I think the funniest thing in it, Kieran Culkin is in it also, by the way. This is the scene where he's dropping down from the second floor of this house in Bel Air. Now, in the movie, their house is in San Marino, which is next to Pasadena, which is the wealthiest old money in Pasadena, is in San Marino in South Pass, and they're making believe that they're impoverished. When you see their house at the beginning, it is almost a mansion. They will then go to Bel Air, which is a bigger mansion, but I mean a mega mansion in Bel Air, and they're acting as if they're out of their element. It's just a crazy story beat. They should have given him a tiny little house. But Martin Short does indeed steal the movie as this interior decorator. And you get to see Martin Short really for the first time in a mainstream Hollywood film, and really turn it on as this crazy interior decorator. The soundtrack of the film was great. The remake rights came from Disney, because they had obviously made that before as a remake of Father of the Bride, as many people know. And this will lead us into, he'll make a cameo in Grand Canyon, by the way, in 1991. But this will lead us into another film called L.A. Story. Now, L.A. Story is a crazy film that is surreal. It's hard for me to explain L.A. Story because it's got talking, moving lions. It's got a highway billboard that talks to Steve Martin, gives him advice on his love life. Right. This is really interesting. Steve Martin, this is his production, and he based it on Marat Sade or this French, indie film that I think a guy named Brooks did. Really avant-garde thing based on Marat Sade, and he feels that he's shooting out the window on the 101. He's having a gunfight with an old lady at the beginning of the movie. That's how over the top this thing is. This is really over the top. And I don't know, either you buy into LA Stories or you don't. This is the shootout woman yelling at him for cutting her off. And it is his homage in a way to LA. There's actually a little cameo by Chevy trying to get a seat in the restaurant. I don't know. It's not one of my favorites, but it's an avant-garde attempt by Steve Martin to what he felt was to make his version of Manhattan, the Woody Allen homage to Manhattan. I don't think it works, but wow. At least he tried. Let me put it that way. But the situation becomes, again, this is not a money maker for the studios. The Marat Sade, if anybody can find this, it's done by Peter Brooks, and it is a strange little film. He will play a character in Leap of Faith. Now, I don't know if people have seen Leap of Faith, but Leap of Faith is Steve Martin playing a con man preacher. Now, this has been done before, but this movie, I got to tell you, it is so well done, and it's got it's got an all-star cast. A friend of mine named MC Gainey is in it, who I knew for many years, a huge character actor from Mississippi. Liam Neeson's in it. Lolita Davidovich plays a love interest. Meatloaf is the driver of the bus. Philip Seymour Hoffman, extremely thin in this movie as well. Deborah Winger is the love interest of Liam Neeson, who plays the sheriff in this small Kansas town. One of the wonderful things about the film, and I recommend you people go take a look at Leap of Faith, because it shows you at the beginning how these cons work in these tent revival evangelistic traveling circuses. And Liam Neeson plays the sheriff who's onto him. This is not an over-the-top comedy. This is a serious film. And he tries to prevent this con man from taking money from the people in this town in Kansas who have fallen on hard times. But he's really good at preaching. and phony faith healing and doing this thing. But the fascinating thing for me is the research done by this guy, Janice Sircone, who wrote the script into the actual physical cons, how they go through the audience and eavesdrop. And this is a Jim Baker type of thing, but it's got resonance to a lot of phony preachers, especially one who ended up in the jungles of South America, and ending in a violent manner down there. It's got a lot of similarities to a lot of them put into one character, and Steve Martin does an incredible job as this con man, evil preacher, faith healer. He does have a turn of character near the end, but it is a real movie with a real budget. Let me see. It was a $20 million budget. It made $23 million at the box office, so it obviously lost money. But it's got an incredible black choir who are part of his hustle, who travel with him. It's a big movie. It is a big movie, and I recommend it, despite what the box office did. Also that same year, The House Sitter comes out with him and his old friend, Goldie Hawn, and this is directed by Frank Oz, who is one of these guys he works with a lot. And it's produced, and the story is by Brian Grazer, who obviously knows what he's doing, is the point I'm mentioning, Brian Grazer. And Dana Delaney is in it, and Goldie Hawn sneaks into the guy's house and takes it over. So it's kind of an evil Goldie Hawn thing, and she plays it very, very, very well. Now, this will lead us into something called Mixed Nuts in 1994, Complete Bomb, and A Simple Twist of Fate, which I also think was a complete bomb. It made $3 million at the box office, and then Mixed Nuts made about $6 million at the box office. Mixed Nuts was a complete disaster. It cost $20 million and made $6 million at the box office. Absolute debacle. Madeline Kahn, Robert Klein, Anthony LaPaglia, Juliette Lewis, Rob Reiner, Adam Sandler, Rita Wilson, and you would think they would be able to pull something off, but no way. Absolute debacle based on a French 1982 French comedy. Santa Claus is a stinker. That's the English translation from the French for Mixed Nuts. It didn't mix any nuts, and the studios were beginning to lose faith in Steve Martin, and the loss of faith will continue because he will do Sergeant Bilko in 1996 with his old friend Dan Aykroyd, and that turns out to be a debacle. Sergeant Bilko, nobody wants to see Steve Martin as a military guy, even though it's a kind of a remake of the TV show with Sergeant Bilko. You would think that this would work, but apparently not, my friends, because nobody wants to see this. He in the 1990s, just to digress for a second, he begins to write short pieces for the New Yorker. He begins to write plays. He wrote a play called Picasso at the Lapin Agile, and it's performed, it's 1993 is why I'm mentioning it. It's performed at the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. And he realizes, again, like he did with stand-up, that the movies are coming to an end. And he realizes that Phil Silvers, yeah. He realizes that he can't continue to have these flops and still look these people in the eye and say, give me some more money for the movies that I'm losing you money for. It's the ups and downs of the industry, but he's made 40 of these. Steve Martin famously said, I had to make 40 movies to get 5 good ones. That's not a good track record, 1 out of 8. is not traditionally how this is done for a movie star. Now, we did cover Robin Williams, and their careers are similar in terms of hits and misses. But Robin was much more of a trained actor. Steve Martin has absolutely no training. He has no, I mean, Robin Williams went to Juilliard, for Christ's sakes, and knew what he was doing in front of a camera. Steve Martin, he had drug problems, obviously, which Steve Martin doesn't. But Robin Williams was a trained thespian, and Martin is not. So he's winging it in all these different movies. So he begins to write plays, but I just wanted to get back to his art collection before we move on. And he has all of these incredible pieces of art that he begins collecting. Even in 1969, he sees the writing on the wall and begins to put together this vast collection of, I mean, like Picasso's and Hoppers and Degas and Seurat's and everybody. I mean, major pieces. He becomes a professional art collector. One of the great lines by Martin Short, he comes out to meet him at his house, never met him before, and he's stunned by the collection of art in Steve Martin's house. And he says to him, I cannot believe the wealth of art that you have in this house. And he pauses and says, how did you make all this money? I've seen your movies. And Steve Martin cracks up laughing. I mean, it's a great line. He's got O'Keeffe's in there. He's got Lichtenstein's in there, Hockney's. I mean, it's crazy. Has a house on Bedford Drive with all these paintings in there, and kind of lives alone after the Victoria Tennant debacle of her running off and him dating others. He'll in 2007, he'll remarry. But he writes these plays, and he writes a book in 79, which was Cruel Shoes. Also kind of these short stories that kind of get expanded in the New Yorker magazine pieces. But the reason I'm mentioning all this is that I believe he sees the end of his movie career coming. And he will do a film called The Out of Towners, again with Goldie Hawn. This is a remake of the classic Out of Towners with Jack and I forget who the woman was. That is also another bomb, Jack Lemmon, obviously. And that doesn't work out for him. He does A Father of the Bride Part 2. He does a turn with David Mamet in The Spanish Prisoner and The Out of Towners. I'm just curious on the box on The Out of Towners. The box office on The Out of Towners, the movie cost $40 million and grossed 28. He is looking for an exit strategy simply because of his own guilt over these movies. But then I got to tell you, he makes a massive comeback in 1999 because he does a movie with a obscure star named Eddie Murphy, and that's called Bowfinger. Bowfinger is a legitimate Hollywood comedy because of Eddie Murphy and Steve Martin working together on this thing. Now, Steve Martin will play a Roger Corman type director who is on the balls of his ass, scamming and scheming to get a movie done. This is a fantastic film where Eddie Murphy plays two parts. He actually plays his brother, like a Charlie Murphy character, who's just a delivery guy. But he also, and Terrence Stamp is in this as the head of Scientology. Eddie Murphy is in Scientology. It's called Mindhead. This comic version of Scientology actually has these e-meter readings with Terrence Stamp, who's kind of the L. Ron Hubbard. Sandy Dennis, thank you. I couldn't remember her name. Eddie Murphy is a huge Eddie Murphy, big mouth, rocking, rolling star of like Eddie Murphy. And he plays some other character. But the plan of Steve Martin is to shoot Eddie Murphy, the character of Eddie Murphy, in obscure settings and somehow splice a film together of him just about town. and he hooks up with this Eddie Murphy lookalike who reveals later in the movie that he's actually Eddie Murphy's brother, played by Eddie Murphy. I thought it might have been played by Charlie Murphy, but it's played by Eddie Murphy. And it's just absolutely hysterical because he's wearing braces on his teeth, and he's kind of a doofus, and he wants to be an actor himself. And then Eddie Murphy, the Eddie Murphy doofus character is told to run across the 101 with traffic going back and forth. Yeah, that thing, Eddie, had to be filmed crossing a busy street and highway. It's not a highway. I mean, it is the 101. That scene is insane. Absolutely insane. Heather Graham is in it. Terrence Stamp, as I said, it was written by Steve Martin. Now, I don't know. I mean, I always suspected that Steve Martin may have dabbled in Scientology. There's no evidence of that. This is just my theory. Plays a character named L. Hubbard in The Only Guy. He dabbles in Buddhism. He's into philosophy. I would find it hard to believe that he was not well aware of Scientology here doing a parody of Scientology. But I think he may have dabbled in it, and realized that it was not for him. There's too many overlaps in his career about Scientology. Again, that's just my opinion. There's no evidence of that, but there's a lot of little beats in the story in his history that might indicate that he at least looked into it. Let me put it that way. So this movie, Bowfinger, with a budget of $55 million, which may have been the biggest budget of a Steve Martin movie because Eddie's getting paid in this thing, grosses $100 million, which is not crazy, but it is serviceable as a hit movie. And it is extremely, extremely fun to take that ride with them on this comedy adventure, him and Murphy. And Murphy's great in it. Murphy's really great. He does a film called Novocaine with Helena Bonham Carter and Laura Dern, again, playing a sadistic dentist. It was like a $6 or $8 million budget. It grosses about $2 million. I don't know. Danny Elfman's in it, who's a Scientologist. He did the music. Hey, I'm going to back up on this thing now. He did have Juliette Lewis in another movie, who's a Scientologist. So I'm gonna look into this a little more after the show. He doesn't need to be there. I just need the address. I don't know what that's about. But he does do Cheaper by the Dozen in 2003. Now, this film is again one of these family films that has had success for Steve Martin. And this is another one. It has a $40 million budget and takes in $200 million at the box office with Bonnie Hunt and Hilary Duff and a bunch of other people in it who make cameo. Richard Jenkins is in it. Dax Shepard is in it. That's weird. Amy Hill, Ashton Kutcher, Sean Levy is the director. Was a roommate of mine's stepbrother who never spoke to him. The movie is a huge hit, and I think Sean Levy will later do the Night at the Museum movies with Ben Stiller, among others. Gross isn't talent necessarily. Was Elfman's ex-wife, Bridget Fonda. I don't think Bridget Fonda was a Scientologist, but Elfman definitely was. And that makes me highly suspicious. In 2006, he will do a couple of Pink Panther movies, or not both of them in 2006. The cinematographers are too funny in Bowfinger. Yes, absolutely true. He will do this thing with Kevin Kline. It's again Sean Levy, the same director that I just mentioned. A remake of the original. There are some very funny scenes in this movie. You can't take it for too long, but it's based on the Blake Edwards, the original one. But there is some very, even interestingly enough, Beyonce has a part in this movie playing Beyonce character, but Jean Reno is in it. Emily Mortimer, who's fantastic. Kevin Kline, who can do no wrong. The budget is now 80 million and it grossed 164, so it kind of lost money. But these budgets seem to be getting higher and higher and higher. Obviously shot in Paris, so it's going to be more. There's Jean Reno right there. Obviously, there's a lot of language jokes and things of that nature, but it looks like a big budget film. And yeah, he's no, to quote his father, Ed, he's no Peter Sellers, to paraphrase his father's quote about Charlie Chaplin. Again, he's winging this because he has no training. It's really insanely commendable what Steve Martin does with the limited skills that he's born with. Everything he does is self-made. He learns how to tap dance for pennies from heaven. He will do a sketch with Gregory Hines later on a show, and he's serviceable as a tap dancer. Everything he does, he learns. Steve Martin did the remakes. Yeah, but these films that he's doing are now going to eventually lead to him trying to extricate himself from the film business. I think at one point he says he's done, may have been after these Pink Panther films, but at one point he says, I'm not going to do this anymore. I think it might have been something happens in 2004 that I just wanted to mention. He buys a painting called Landscapes with Horses. It's supposed to be, it was a 1915 painting that he bought for 700,000 euros. And 15 months later, he sells it for a loss to Christie's auction house. I think he bought it from Sotheby's. And he sold it for $500,000 to Christie's auction house. And it turns out, he is amazing for his versatility. And it turns out that this painting that he sold is a fraud. And this becomes a mini kerfuffle because he denies having any knowledge of it. However, he sells it within 15 months of achieving ownership of it for 200,000 euros less than he bought it for. I've never believed that he didn't know it was a fraud. That's just me. He escapes unscathed. Let me put it that way. He escapes unscathed from this scandal. And it turns out that there's a couple of these frauds roaming around Europe. And we've since found out there's a bunch of them that are in art galleries that are still in art galleries and still unproven to be frauds. But in 2007, like I said, he marries Anne Stringfield. Now, the story with Anne Stringfield, like I said, she is a fact checker at the New Yorker who calls him up and says, you know, your stories are satirically funny stories, but they're also factually wrong in their storytelling. And if she says, if you like, I can fact check them and make them more accurate. In other words, he's got George Bush in there. He's got stuff about Cheney, just jokes about them. But the factual things surrounding the jokes are inaccurate. And she begins to do a regular fact check on an article for him and talks to his sister, begins to check the facts on the family. I don't know about Buster Keaton, but he does worship Charlie Chaplin. And interestingly enough, he does worship Laurel and Hardy and despises the Three Stooges. So you could take that with a grain of salt, just for comedy people out there who know what that means. I don't have to go into the difference between the two comedy acts, but he's not a Marx Brothers guy. He's not a guy who he thought the Stooges were violent. He likes Laurel and Hardy and Jack Benny and that type of comedy. But that being said, she does a fact-checking thing and gets to meet him. And somehow they, in 2007, get married. The deal breaker for her is that she wants to have a baby. Now, keep in mind, in every interview he's ever done, he refuses to speak about children. Refuses. He will not go there, and he says in these deep interviews, and then the interviewer will switch gears and say, "Okay, let's talk about your art collection." And he says, "I don't talk about my art collection either." So these two taboo subjects that he refuses to speak about in public are having a family and his art collection. As odd or not odd as that seems, in every interview that it ever comes up, he refuses to discuss either one of them. So here, the deal breaker for Anne Stringfield is to have a baby. And she's in her 40s or late 30s or 41-ish. And in 2012, she gives birth. He's 67. She's obviously there's a difference of about 26 years or 27 years, but they do have this beautiful daughter. And like I said before, this may be, she's obviously like 2 or 3 here. So this may be 2015, 2016, depending on it. Yeah. There he is as a father now, finally. Maybe if he lives long enough, he could be the father of the bride, because that was 2012. So now she would be, this is 2026. Well, she's about 14, right? 2026 or 14. Yeah, maybe another 4 or 6 years. She could get married and he could really be the father of the bride. But in 2009, he gets and comes back and does It's Complicated. And he is the third person on the call sheet. And he's startled by this because when you're on a film, one of the phrases that is heard on a film is number one walking, number one doing this, number one that, number one this with a PA. And he's now number 3. Number 1 is Alec Baldwin, and number 2 is Meryl Streep, or reversing it. And he's number 3 on the call sheet. And he's never heard his number being called out while walking around a set as number 3. And that is an interesting moment in his film career. This is 2009, and he plays the husband to Meryl Streep, who was with Alec Baldwin previously. It's a very good movie, carried by the two of them. Short said Steve looked 70 since he was 30. Great line by Martin Short, by the way. In 2016, he collaborates with Edie Brickell. Many people may not know her. I was in love with her from afar. Edie Brickell in The New Bohemians. I think she was with Paul Simon for a while. And he does his first musical on Broadway called Bright Star, set in the 1920s. He goes back into this Pennies from Heaven thing. It goes in flashbacks to the 20s, but set in 1945. It gets like 5 Tony nominations and is really a huge hit for the music that him and Edie Brickell write for the musical called Bright Star. And this is really a legitimate hit for him as a person on Broadway. Like I said, December 2012, he has the baby girl. He's at 67. He does a legitimate play at the Booth Theater in 2016 with Amy Schumer and other cast members, including Keegan-Michael Key, called Meteor Shower. And this is married to Paul Simon now. I don't know about now, but she definitely was. But maybe she still is. I don't know. And that becomes a big hit at the Booth Theater. And he is legitimized now as a guy who's written a number of books, written plays, he did a play called Wasp, which is really his family. It's got his childhood, his father. It's a legitimate drama. And it is a little painful to watch if you know his story, because the kid who's playing him will actually speak as him. If you can find that play anywhere, it is really interesting. But I want to say in 2018-ish, he does this Netflix comedy special, An Evening You Will forget for the rest of your life with Martin Short. And I think he went on the road with Martin Short. This is filmed, I think, in South Carolina. And he played, let's take a look at this. Maybe there's some photos from this. Yeah, this is it. This is the film, the card for it. There's Steve Martin. This is just from 2018, folks. Two Amigos. It's him and Martin Short, really having a great time. Martin Short just kills, man. Absolutely destroys. So the two of them. Wow, yeah, this is Martin Short comes out as Jimmy Glick as a marionette puppet to this thing here is absolutely hysterical. It's still on Netflix if you want to find this. Martin Short is a Canadian. Yes, he's Canadian. They have a sit down together, and they also have a little mini roast between the two of them right here, as you'll see them going back and forth, cutting each other. Delightfully done. Really, Steve Martin has taken on the cadence. I don't understand it. You can close your eyes and think you're listening to David Letterman. He has taken on the rhythm, sound effects, and cadence of David Letterman. Just close your eyes, and I don't know what to make of it. I brought in somebody else last night to close their eyes and listen to this, and he is doing David Letterman. The jokes, the rhythm, everything. I don't know if he brought in David Letterman's joke writers or what, but it's quite entertaining. But Short really steals the evening, and Martin disappears, and Short, with a piano player there, Martin Short does about 20 minutes of a one-man show. And then they come back out together, and Martin will play with this band. He'll play bluegrass music with them and shine on the banjo. He'll also come out and do a little riffing with the banjo, just, doing some jokes and stuff. But like I said, he's not a stand-up comic, and he was playing the straight man, and he does not want to go back to doing that stand-up stuff. He refuses to do it in this show. So the show is really him riffing with Marty Short. But it's worth the price of admission, and there is no admission unless you have to, I don't know, sign up for Netflix. But it's very entertaining, and he toured with him. And I think that's the end. He did this thing for Hulu called Murder in the House, or it was a whodunit with Gomez and Martin Short for Hulu. And he said in 2022, that's it, he's done. So that series that was on Hulu, which I've not seen, is his final thing by him. So I think he's just about done, but he may be writing plays. This is it. Only Murders in the Building with Selena Gomez and Martin Short and him. I have not seen it yet. I will take a look at it, but I think he's going to continue to write short stories and plays. He's got a house up in Santa Barbara, some brutalist structured architecture that looks like a fortress out of some, post-apocalyptic world or something up there. But his relationship with Martin Short is, everyone who knows him doesn't know him. And there's a Steve Martin documentary where each person they interview says, I really don't know anything about him. And that you would think that these people all would know him, but he's a super, super private person. And even the closest friends claim they don't really know him. I don't know if that's happy or sad, but he doesn't let people into his life, maybe to avoid pain. I think his sister refers to it as, growing up in this dysfunctional family. He may have trust issues. He may have issues of opening himself up because of the dysfunction that he went through. But clearly one of the great, look at this. This is, I don't know if this is his. Is this his? Oh yeah, this is his. Yeah. Wow. It is a incredible brutalist piece of architecture. I'm not a fan of it, but wow. He is an enigma, is a private person, is super introverted, is super shy, created this character to perform this wild and crazy guy character based on other people's characters. The Happy Feet, Dan Aykroyd turns it into the Wild and Crazy Guys, that incredible sketch that they did on SNL. This was done by Aykroyd, who saw the ability to do that, and Steve Martin rolling with Aykroyd's take on it. He is able to work with others who are super creative. I'll give him that. And off camera, he is this super introverted guy. He is the example. Bill Murray was down in South Carolina last week, and there was a bluegrass concert. The reason I'm mentioning this story, and outside of the venue were 100 people lined up to get into this concert, this bluegrass concert. Bill Murray goes in, buys up every single ticket, comes back out and gives them away for free to everyone who was online. That's Bill Murray. Steve Martin, when confronted by an autograph seeker, will take out a business card and which says, "You have met Steve Martin," and gives the person the business card. It's funny, but it also shows you the difference between a Bill Murray and a Steve Martin in relation to their fans. And that's why I tell you this story. He plays an introvert. He is an introvert. And his relation with his fans and his germophobia and everything else has distanced himself from stand-up comedy, which he never really wanted to do, and was glad to get out of it by 1981 and get into the movie business. It's just a fascinatingly bizarre career that reached enormous heights all through the stand-up, as I said, the most financially successful. I saw Andrew Dice Clay sell out Madison Square Garden, but that was in 1989. This guy was doing it in 1976, 77, selling out the Nassau Coliseum, and he begins to wear the white suits, which came from Eve Babbitt's, by the way. He begins to wear the white suits because the people can't see him on stage from the upper levels of these gigantic auditoriums. And it becomes, more, like I said, of him being the MC of a night of drinking and partying than an actual stand-up routine, which he can't alternate from. I mean, the whole Steve Martin story, he never has a scandal. He never gets arrested. I'm saying compared to show business icons, he never disses anyone. He doesn't get into fights with people like Chevy Chase and Bill Murray do. He is a guy who's run a perfect show business career, if there is such a thing, of being a mega star, making tons of money, having a child late in life, taking care of that family. He does take care of his own family. He buys them homes. He refuses to let them disappear. He goes back and develops relationships with his mother and father until the day they die. At one point, his mother is 91 years of age and says, "Can you tell Glenn to come in here?" His father's name. And he says, "Mom, Glenn died 3 years ago." And she says, "Well, that explains everything." And he cracks up laughing. His mother was, getting into dementia at the age of 91. But he takes care of both his parents until the day they die, even though he's got these incredible problems with them. And this is obviously them down in Orange County. But, the shows that people saw in the movies that you saw, you may want to just comment down below of what your favorite Steve Martin movie or experience was in seeing him. And that could be SNL, or that could be the movies. The experience is so vast, and it covers so many different things. Like I said, the SNL hosting, the movies themselves, the live stand-up, the plays. Nobody has ever come close to expanding into these other areas professionally as Steve Martin has done. So you got to tip your hat to Steve Martin and the Rabbit Ears and the Arrow, and he's putting on the gallery shows now of his own art. He's made himself into an art historian and knows art inside and out. It's just a fascinating American success story. It really is. A kid working from the age of 10 at Disneyland and working up to the highest levels of American show business. It's just the greatest show business success story of all time. And I've seen and heard and read quite a bit about a lot of different show business stories. But holy cow, the Steve Martin story is an amazing story from beginning to end, from the age of 10. This is him with Mitzi Trumbo. I just want to talk about Mitzi Trumbo for a second, because she's the daughter of the avowed communist Dalton Trumbo. He gets exposed to Dalton Trumbo, who people remember from writing Spartacus and being in the Hollywood 10 and a lot of other things. Dalton Trumbo was an avowed true believer. He took notes. He took notes on his scripts from Moscow directly into Hollywood through Soviet spies, just so people know the truth about Dalton Trumbo. Whatever you think about that is up to you. But he was brought into that family by Mitzi Trumbo, who he dated for a number of years. And her whole family were communists at that time in Hollywood. But he moved on from her and, eventually, like I said, married Victoria Tennant and dated these other women, all of which were fascinating. He always hit the magic shop when he went to Disneyland in the 60s. Oh, you did? Yeah. No, I mean, he was always there every day after school. Keep in mind, he's still going to school, and then high school, and then college, and he's still working there. This is him doing some magic. He must be 17 there or so. But I don't know. We've done a couple of hours on Steve Martin. If you have any questions on Steve, because I could talk for a long time about Steve Martin, but I think 2 hours is quite a bit of information for you guys there. If you have any statements or super chats or whatever, now would be the time. If you want to subscribe to the show, or not a Trumbo fan, but he could have captured, not a Trumbo fan, but she could have captured. Yeah, I mean, the daughter was interesting. I mean, yeah, thanks, Ed. He got sucked into that world and then pulled out. He was kind of an apolitical guy. He kind of saw the 60s as an aberration and did not want to be part of it politically. He really, for the most part, was apolitical. And I think this factors in to a lot of his view of the world, that he did not go down that road as others of his ilk and generation did. He may be one of the world's top 5 banjo players. I'm not sure. But he made a joke about going to see Eric Clapton. He said, not a very good guitar player, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, he could pick. There's no doubt about it. But interestingly enough, never in a band. Ed, I thank you again. I find this bizarre. But again, it goes to Steve Martin, the lonely guy, about him being in his room alone, picking banjos. All of me, okay. everybody has their particular favorite Steve Martin movie, moment. I just want to say that Steve Martin never being in a band and being that banjo player, and I'm talking about a teen band. Thank you, Stacy. Being in a teen band or any garage rock. Now, I know it's banjo, but you could have, that's a great, funny joke. You could have been in a bluegrass band in Orange County, in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, but he'd rather be alone. Thank you, Ed. Thank you so much. The stories of him and his loneliness are really what makes him. Speaking of Bridget Fonda, did security for the Jackie Brown premiere in New York City in 1997. Well, I wouldn't want you to see her today, my friend Al, because there is. Elfman got lucky. Danny's made a lot of movie money being a movie composer and sound guy. But hey, Alan, welcome. I see you both of you. These officers are in the house today. Welcome, Alan, and welcome, Al. The three amigos won't be a time. Yeah, look, your favorites, my favorites. We've all got favorites. The point of the matter is, this guy has covered the waterfront in terms of movies and comedy. These things didn't really exist. Everybody takes it for granted now that these SNL comedies come out. But he went into New York and literally took over those shows, working with that cast and crew. There is a clip. I don't know if we have a couple of photos of it. There is a clip where he is with Garrett Morris, and they're backstage in the locker room of SNL, and Belushi hears him say, "Excuse me," and tries to tear him physically apart as part of the sketch. But yeah, here it is. There's a picture of Garrett Morris holding Steve Martin, and thank you, William Radcliffe. And I think that's Bill Murray holding back Belushi from tearing apart Steve Martin, because Belushi can't stand to listen to "Excuse Me" anymore. And there might be some truth to that, knowing Belushi, who did not like being upstaged by anyone. But nevertheless, him and Chase got along, and he really became great friends. And if you can imagine that deadpan, phony, smug style of humor that Chase developed and Martin developed is very, very similar. And Chase, I think, might have been more successful. I was listening to Tarantino talking about the comparison of the two people in a Joe Rogan interview. And Tarantino said he preferred the movies of Chevy Chase to those of Steve Martin, simply because Steve Martin changes in his movies and tries all these different characters, but that Chevy Chase remains an asshole character throughout his movies. Oh, that's great. That's a great shot of the three of them. Yeah. I mean, Martin Short and Steve Martin had such a great time on Three Amigos that they became friends for life. You know, from what I understand, Steve Martin has a very, very tiny inner circle. I can only take Tarantino in small doses. Well, he's only the greatest American filmmaker in American history. So I don't know what small doses you want to take him in, but I'm sorry that he's leaving the movie world, because now we have no one but P.T. Anderson. But anyway, I thought you guys, if you want to get this material in back of me, these books by Steve Martin are out there for you to read. You could see the album over there and some of the stuff I researched over the years on Steve Martin. It's a love for this American comedy god. I'm going to do This Week in Showbiz History on Wednesday. I hope you can all come back for that. And then I'm going to do Dan Aykroyd. And there's a lot about Dan Aykroyd, because I partied with Dan Aykroyd. So there'll be some personal stories there with me and Danny. And I'm Chevy Chase and You're Not was a great. Yeah. Oh, I was wondering if anybody saw the documentary that I recommended. It was very, very interesting, because there's a photo of apparently we stayed in the same dormitory, me and Chevy Chase. I did not know that. Just waiting for that horn to go by. There is a photo at the beginning of the documentary, 1965, of Chevy Chase at Bard and his dormitory. And I was shocked to see that he was in the same building that I was in. Obviously, he was there in 65. I wasn't there until 1973. But yeah, I'd recommend the Chevy Chase documentary on CNN if you could find it. It was released in some sort of film festivals in December, but acid with Aykroyd needs to happen. Well, we're going to go back and revisit that. Liquid Acid, brought by Al Franken and Tom Davis, for those keeping score at home. But yeah, we'll do Aykroyd in 2 weeks. A lot of Canadians so far, but that's the way it is in American comedy in the 70s and 80s and 90s. There were so many Canadian influences. But I just want to thank everyone for the super chats because it really helps getting the show started and getting this channel off the ground. And if you want to pass this on to other people, it would really help develop an audience. But check out Wally Bogue, because Wally Bogue is an unknown vaudevillian comedy legend that Steve borrowed from. And not to hassle him, but just a guy who never got any credit for what Steve Martin later gets credit for. The female who interviewed him was real special. Yeah, she's a piece of work. I know. He did the best he could. You mentioned that Steve did not give out autographs. He gives out business cards. Yeah. He also has a letter that he writes to fans that has a fill in the blank for his name and where they met and some other funny things. You get the card. Yeah, you get the business card. You have met Steve Martin. It was a pleasurable experience. I forget what it says, but thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Just Missy. Anyway, I got to go buy some biltong, enjoy the playoffs. We'll be back on Wednesday. I'll be over on the other channel on Friday with some news with Eric. We'll cover the world events, but I'm trying to get away from politics because it just eats you alive. Yeah, he does an amazing Sinatra. I forgot about that. Thanks, Ed. He does an incredible Sinatra, not to rain on Joe Piscopo's parade, but he does. Yeah, you got to try it. I didn't know anything about it. Viva turned me on to the biltong. It's absolutely delicious. Please try it. You get a discount. You don't like it, you don't have to go back. But really check it out. I am completely hooked on this biltong stuff. And I was not a beef jerky guy, but it's just a really like having very thin slices of steak, sliced very thin, like an incredible steak. That's the closest thing I can explain it to you. But go Eagles. Well, I got the Packers Bears on Prime, which I'm reminding people is not on regular TV. Somehow Prime has bought this game, and I can't even use my TiVo. I'm going to lose my freaking mind. But get the biltong. Gilda Radner is on the cusp. There's not that long of a career, but I can't really just do Gilda Radner for the sake of doing Gilda Radner. I'm trying to do the giants of comedy. There's other women that I will do, so it's not a female thing. But here's a secret code for biltong, 10% off. I'd strongly recommend at least trying one of them. You cannot go wrong, especially during the playoff season. Oh, yeah, they've got biltong in your refrigerator. Got it yesterday. I'm telling you, man, people are going to dig this thing. I had no idea until I visited Viva in Boca, and he turned me on to it a year ago. Catherine Harold, I don't know who Catherine Harold is. Amazon will probably crash. That's funny. I don't know about that. That's a good question. Hard to do Gilda without getting into Gene Wilder. No, I could do Gene Wilder without doing Gilda. That's for sure. That being said, we'll see what happens with this lineup that I've got. But put down below what you want to see next, because I have all these names. It's just a question of the order. Let me put it that way, because I am going to go back in time, and I am going to do. I have to do Jerry Lewis, of course. Are you crazy? I'm talking about the gods of comedy. I'm not. I'm trying to do the mega gods. Are you kidding? Anyway, I gotta go because I got some things I got to do and get ready for tomorrow. But thanks everyone for coming by. Pass it on to your friends. Subscribe. Thank you again for the amazing amount of super chats. I hope you had a good time on the show, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday if I don't see you on Friday, because this is actually turning out to be a lot of fun. So we'll see you guys later. Thanks.